Hello and welcome to episode number 363. This is the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com and I'm Cornelius Fichtner. Do you enjoy our interviews? If so, then please remember that we are a listener-supported podcast and your subscription would help keep us going. You can find all the details by visiting pm-podcast.com/premium. Have you heard of supportive leadership? I certainly had not. I knew what servant leadership was, but the concept of supportive leadership, that was a definite unknown. But that changed when Joseph Flahiff got in touch with me and suggested this interview. I was intrigued. Are you PMP certified and want to earn 37 PDUs quickly and for less than $5 per hour? That's no problem with the Agile Prepcast. It not only prepares you for your PMI ACP exam, but also qualifies for a ton of PMP PDUs. Visit agileprepcast.com/PDU for the details. The good news is that Joseph is a prolific writer who has a number of articles on the topic. He reviews the concept from various angles, and he also has a number of great examples of how he works with his customers to implement supportive leadership in their organizations and how he uses the concept as a project leader himself. You'll be able to incorporate all of this as part of your own project leadership almost right away. And of course, we will also touch upon the main difference between supportive leadership and servant leadership. You'll probably be just as surprised as I was. And now, enjoy the interview.
The Project Management Podcasts feature interview.
Today with Joseph Flahiff, project management author, consultant, and organizational alchemist. Hello, Joseph. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, Cornelius. Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So, supportive leadership is our topic today, but let me skip all the way to the end of our conversation. What is going to be the big takeaway that our listeners will learn from this discussion?
I think the big takeaway will actually depend on where the listener is coming from. So they'll either hear a completely new or at least a slightly new, different approach to leadership, or they will be hearing something that maybe confirms and gives them more language to speak about what they feel internally already.
So is supportive leadership something new?
Is supportive leadership new? It's not really necessarily new per se, but I've put a language and a framework around some things that I've always done and that I've seen work well in my clients. So in that sense, as a thing, it's relatively new. There's a million forms of leadership, and we're all trying to describe what great leadership looks like and how we see great leaders act. So this is my framework for describing how great leaders work.
And talking how you describe this, you wrote several articles about supportive leadership. And in them, you talk about supportive leadership mostly in the context of line management and operations management. Does it translate over into project management?
Absolutely. Actually, that's where I come from, is the project management world. So that's actually where I cut my teeth on leadership, is in project management. So it definitely applies very directly into what we do as project managers.
Well, then, let's explore this further. Can you give us an example of how traditional leadership in action would work? And then maybe followed by how we would manage the similar project situation using supportive leadership.
Sure. I'll give it an example of a form of traditional leadership. There's as many forms of leadership as there are people who lead. So commonly in the past century or so, leadership has been formed around leaders in a hierarchical organization and deciding what to do in a particular situation. So if you were on a project, say you were building a building, a traditional leader in that context would say, we are going to build this building. Here's the things that I want it to be, and would give the direction of that as a project manager, say you're a project manager who's in charge of the project management of the IT components within that building that's being built. So you would have a scope that you're handed, and then you would break that work down and give that work to the individuals on the team, maybe work with their managers to assign them to the particular work that they're doing and make sure that they execute on it, right? That's kind of a traditional model for leading, right? Tell them what to do, make sure that it's happening, follow up, maybe encourage them as you're going along. But the more supportive leadership model of that says, your job as a leader is to make the other people successful. So it is not as much to drive the project to completion as it is to align the people on your team or within your organization so that they can feel the empowerment to actually do that. Now, empowerment's a massively overused term, but I use it and very carefully. I've written a couple of different places where I talk about you can't actually empower anyone. You can only offer them opportunities for them to take on empowerment. So empowerment is a big part of the supportive leadership model because you want to hand over to the people who are actually doing the work, the decisions and the decision making. So in that model where you're the project manager and you're in charge of executing the IT components within the construction project, so you're a subcomponent of the project, you would be then more facilitating these other people doing great work. Your job as the leader then is to, yes, absolutely help communicate the vision of where you're going and to help define, hey, these are the parameters that we have to work within. But within that, then allow the people who are doing the work to be the decision makers on the work. And I think that's where the big differentiator is between a more traditional approach and the supportive leadership model is where are decisions made?
This brings up a totally different question. It has to do with strong leadership because everybody wants a strong leader, somebody who makes things happen. But the way you've explained it and the word, supportive leadership itself evokes terms like subordinate, subservient, maybe servant leadership. So can a supportive leader be strong?
Absolutely. I would say you actually have to be strong. I would say it actually takes a stronger leader to be a supportive leader than it does to be a directive leader, because it takes a lot of strength of personality and guts to say, I trust this team enough to hand off the decisions that I'm not going to make them. You cannot tell someone you have the authority and the responsibility and the ownership of this. You go make the decision and then turn back on them. My wife and I have a great little word picture that we use to describe this. We talk about who's got the rock, right? You cannot both be holding a rock at the same time. If the rock is in my hand, it's in my hand. If I hand it to you, it is in yours. That rock is now yours, and you are totally accountable, responsible, and have the authority to make decisions about it. Not me, you. So can you be a strong leader? Yes. It takes a lot of strength to say, I am going to support these people as they make the decisions and stand behind them and grow them so that they can make better decisions. Maybe they're not strong enough yet to make these decisions, so we're going to help them grow to make even better decisions than I would. So I definitely.
Well, can you maybe give us an example about how you personally used supportive leadership on your own projects?
Sure.
How you handed the rock over, yeah. To use your words.
Yeah. Well, I was using the analogy or the example earlier of being the IT person on the construction project only because I was working at the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center about, a decade ago. And I only use that example because it's very clear. I've been doing lots of projects since then, but this is a very clear distinction between the two. I met with the project team to decide how are we going to execute this work. And the team was pretty used to being told what to do, right? Here's here's the work we need to have done. Here's you do this part, you do that part, you do that part, go. And my approach was to bring the group together and say, okay, we've been given the charge to have this much technology go in, right? These are the number of outlets and the number of people and all the parameters of the building that we were building. Here's the budget we've got. You all are the smart people who do this for a living. Tell me, what is the plan going to be? And as the project manager for that, I facilitated their discussion amongst themselves and helped them come up with the plan. So having them actually be the ones driving it and leading each other in different moments of the conversation, that was one example of when I had opportunity to practice supportive leadership.
What do you like about using supportive leadership?
I like a lot of things about it. There's a couple of things come quickly to mind, though. One is I believe the job of any leader is not to lead people. The job of a leader is to create other leaders. And my job is to help the people who are on the team to grow as leaders. Now, that makes the assumption that I make as well, is that everyone is a leader. In some models, there's leaders and there's followers, but I don't buy that. I believe that every single person in every single organization is a leader, just at different times. So if you're a database jockey or a data entry person or a secretary, you actually are a leader. It just depends on what the context is that we're talking about. You may not be leading the whole organization, the whole company, or the whole project, but when the conversation turns to the data, that data entry person is who everyone turns to because they are the most intimate and most familiar with that information. They are, in that moment, a leader. And so my job as a team leader is to grow those people on the team so that they're ready when the conversation turns and they're on the spot and their opportunity to shine is there. So I love that about supportive leadership.
Are there any situations when you would not use supportive leadership?
Would I not use supportive leadership? Not really. I honestly can't think of a situation where I wouldn't use it. Everything from working with my children, I want to grow them as leaders of the future, to working with, when I do coaching with CEOs and executives, helping them learn to lead their company.
Could I also assume that it's a question of how much, let's take a dog analogy, how much leash you give them? So if you have a inexperienced team member who is new, you would still use supportive leadership, but you would, hold them a little tighter. Whereas, on the other side, you have an experienced team member, you've worked with them several times, you know what they're doing and how they're doing it. You basically point into the direction and say, go, I'll support you all the way. Is that how, how you would differentiate?
Yeah, definitely. When you have different people of different skill sets and different levels, you're going to be handling the way you interact with them differently, but you're still giving them that opportunity to grow and reach and learn. I think that far too often leaders are afraid to give up that authority, that decision-making power. They like to hold on to that because they're afraid that the people that they're leading won't make a good decision. And that's nobody's fault but your own as a leader, right? We need to be, as organizational leaders, setting people up to be successful when they come to a point to make those decisions, giving them appropriate level decisions to grow and cut their teeth and get better at and continue to evolve as a leader. So they'll start out as a leader in small things, but grow to being a leader in larger things. And part of the supportive leadership model is to trust that people know themselves too, to a certain extent. You don't find too often that people will take on crazy more power, but crazy bigger decisions than they're ready to make. People understand themselves pretty well and will operate within certain boundaries of reasonableness when it comes to, am I ready to make that decision? Do I have the information to make that decision?
If I think about everything that we've talked about so far, then I have to say that this sounds very much like servant leadership, or at least very close to it. Is that right? What's the big difference then between servant and supportive leadership?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It does have its foundations in the concepts of servant leadership. And before I kind of formed my own thinking around it, I was teaching a lot of servant leadership, those concepts. But then as I dove into teaching servant leadership, I found that there's nothing in servant leadership, the actual formal approach developed by Robert Greenleaf back in the 40s, that actually talks about empowering other people, giving people opportunities to take authority, to take on responsibilities for themselves. And that seemed like a big missing piece to me. So I did some thinking around it, and that's where I've developed my thinking, and kind of a big shift from that servant leadership model is the supportive leadership includes empowering other people to have decision-making authority. A great example of it is one of my clients is a church that I've been working with, coaching the pastoral leadership of the church, who had been practicing servant leadership for years, but not in a empowering kind of way where the people of the organization were empowered to go do stuff. Right? It was still very top-down organization, though serving one another. It's hard to conceive of that, but it really was. And so I've been working with them to really empower other people within the organization to take on ownership. So that's a big difference between those two. Is there's nothing in servant leadership that talks about empowering people to take ownership of decision making.
You are also a public speaker, and you often speak at congresses, and you're even available for our listeners. They can book you as a speaker and bring you in-house. But I didn't see this particular topic here, supportive leadership, listed on your speaking flyer. Do you do workshops on this as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely do. What's listed on the workshop flyer is all the sub-things that make up supportive leadership. So it's all the pieces that fall into it, but not the actual big topic itself.
Right. And if our listeners would be interested in booking you, whitewaterprojects.com, is that where they would need to go to?
Absolutely. Joseph at whitewaterprojects.com, or just go to whitewaterprojects.com and check out the website.
All right. So there are dozens of leadership styles and theories and approaches out there for me to choose from. Is supportive leadership an all or nothing situation? Or can I mix supportive leadership with other styles?
Absolutely can mix it with other things. And as I work with clients and coach them through it, that's what we're doing, right? I'm helping leaders move from one style to a new style. And then that's not just a flip of a switch. So we work incrementally and we iterate, just like an agile project would work. We work together to coach people through growing as leaders themselves.
And how do I become a supportive leader? Is this something that I can learn? Or is this something that comes from inside of me? How do I get there?
Yes. It's both something you would learn and something that comes from inside of you. Eventually, when you've been practicing for a while, it becomes part of who you are. I actually have had to go back and reconstruct it. That's what this effort has been to come up with this model, is me trying to describe what I've always done and help people understand what makes Joseph successful when Joseph does this kind of work. So it's definitely something you can learn through reading it and through practicing, through working with a coach like myself.
All right, to close out our interview, let's help our listeners to, on the journey to becoming more of a supportive leader. Can you give our listeners maybe 3 actions that they can apply that will enable them to use supportive leadership on their projects starting today?
Absolutely, yeah. Number 1, just start thinking about it. It's really hard to change anything if you're not thinking about it. So I'll often work with my coaching clients and have them keep a log of different aspects that they're trying to change. So keep a log of yourself and the decisions and how you're interacting with your team as you go forward through a given day. Just log all the things. And on one side, put the things that were more directive and telling, and on the other side of the paper, put the things that were in support of empowering and giving away decision-making authority. So that's number one. Number two is do those things. Start thinking and reviewing the work that you do and how you go about interacting with people, and see, am I delegating work to people, or am I delegating decision-making power and decisions? Because it's when we delegate the decisions that people get that sense of empowerment. I think those are the two top things that I would have you do just right away. The third thing would be to start meeting with other people. Maybe set up a small group at your organization to start talking about it together, because what you're talking about really becomes it's an individual change, but over time it becomes a cultural change in your organization. So if you can get a cadre of your friends and coworkers who are also leaders and be talking continually about this idea, it will really help to grow yourself and to grow them. So those are the top three things. Keep a log, start delegating decisions, and get together with other people.
Perfect. Joseph, thank you so much for your time today.
You bet. Thank you.
And that was our leadership interview with Joseph Flahiff. Are you PMP certified and want to earn 37 PDUs quickly and for less than $5 per hour? No problem with the Agile Prepcast. It not only prepares you for your PMI ACP exam, but also qualifies for a ton of PMP PDUs. Visit agileprepcast.com/PDU for the details. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening. As always, you can find us on the web at pm-podcast.com. Please send your emails to info@pm-podcast.com, and when you write, please tell me where in the world you are writing from. And finally, we have this. It is a terrible thing to look over your shoulder when you are trying to lead and find no one there. Until next time.